Heredity of Lactose Intolerance by Emily Krause, Bio 316. So, lactose intolerance is defined as the inability to break down the sugar that is in dairy, that is called lactose. The enzyme that is responsible for the breakdown of lactose is called lactase. And the production of lactase is dependent on a gene located on chromosome 2 called the LCT gene. If this gene is not present, lactose will not be broken down. Therefore, that individual is lactose intolerant. There are three factors that influence lactose intolerance, such as geographic location of ancestors, which ties into the environmental factors of their ancestors, genetic and heritability traits of the LCT gene. So around 10,000 years ago, up in the northern regions and Scandinavian regions of Europe, humans began to domesticate cows and drink their milk. There was a famine during this time, so there wasn't much to consume, which was the reason for the domestication and the beginning of the consumption of milk. Before this time period, the LCT gene was not found in the human genome, and upon introduction of lactose in the human diet, that LCT gene was a mutation, which allowed the consumer, the human, to then, in fact, consume dairy. So that was a helpful, beneficial mutation in that case. Um, Lactose tolerance or lactose persistence, they mean the same thing, is a genetic mutation. So the ability to consume milk up into your years, because humans between the ages of 2 and 12 can still theoretically consume milk without any signs or symptoms of lactose intolerance, because we drink our mother's milk while we're young and we eventually wean off of that. We won't drink milk forever. So there's no point in putting the time and the energy in the production of lactase, that enzyme, unless you have the gene. So 75% of the world's population exhibits lactose intolerance. Those alleles and those heritable genetic traits are passed down from mother and father to the offspring, and they're located specifically on chromosome 2. Uh, you can be a carrier of lactose intolerance and be lactose persistent, or vice versa. So it's kind of a hit or miss trait. Just for example, on the right, we see, or excuse me, on the left, we see an A and a B side. The side A is lactose tolerant or lactose persistent, meaning lactase is present to break down lactose into galactose and glucose, it's monosaccharides. And we see lactose B, this is a lactose intolerant individual. There is no lactase present. There's an accumulation of lactose. Water builds up, fermentation happens, and that's where we get all the signs and the symptoms of lactose intolerance. So, environment and geography of the individual's ancestors, as stated earlier, it was the northern regions of Europe that started to domesticate cows and drink their milk and turn their milk into byproducts like cheese and yogurt and all that. So we see that little portion on Northern Europe has virtually no lactose intolerance compared to the rest of the world. We see in warmer climates, specifically South America, Africa, the Middle East, and even in China, there is a high frequency of lactose intolerant. These environments cannot support dairy farms like they could up in the north regions of Europe. Too hot. If there were cows who produced milk, the milk would, in theory, spoil a lot faster because the environment around them was warmer. Because the environment up north was cooler, it was able to keep longer. So these genes, that LCT gene, was not found in those populations. It was a very small portion of the world where that gene originated from that we can trace back to that region still to this day. It was found predominantly in Caucasians. So as there was migration happening, we saw that gene kind of spread across the world, but even still, again, not a very high frequency gene at all. So not until the 1960s was lactose intolerance recognized as a diagnosable condition. It was just thought to be uncomfortable upon consumption. but it was a condition that was treated as such. And modern medicine now labels lactose intolerance as normal versus lactose persistent, which is the mutation form of that gene, which is not necessarily normal because a majority of the global population is, in fact, lactose intolerant. So we took the history and we can see where the genes have brought us now, and we have normalized lactose intolerant because the majority of the people in this world do not have the LCT gene, which codes for the lactose tolerance. So this is just an example of things that have lactose in them. If you think you are lactose intolerant, you can start by cutting things out of your diet. This is a really good quantitative example, but you can also uh, get your ancestry done. I am slightly lactose intolerant. I sent mine away, got my results back, and it made sense given where my ancestors are from that I am slightly lactose um, intolerant. So if you wanted to do that, it is a really great way to trace back not only your own personal history, but you can select certain traits like that and trace them back to the regions where they came from, which is absolutely fascinating. And what a way to immerse yourself in the history of science and even your own personal genome with your family.